So, guys, I'd like to talk about the 48-hour film project. I know, I've talked about, good experiences, the bad experiences, and the ugly experiences about the competition. And ultimately, the big thing that any filmmaker would get out of that competition is two major things is that, you make friends and connections. And then it should also inspire you to do filmmaking because there's a lot of people who have a phobia of making films because films can be overwhelming, films can be very hard, and filmmaking is a very heartbreaking industry. You spend so much time, so much money, and so much dreaming on a project, and then it turns out to be a piece of crap. And then it's almost like, you have to do that maybe 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 100 times, maybe never. Maybe you do 1,000 times and then never get the results that you want, really. But yeah, if filmmaking is heartbreaking, but it's important to realize that anybody can be a filmmaker. Anybody can produce really great quality if they do care. But importantly, you need to have initiative in filmmaking. Like the most important word in filmmaking is not lights, camera, action. It is the word go. But also with the 40-hour film project, I know I've talked about my experiences with the competition. And unfortunately, to be very true and fair, it's been mostly a negative and traumatic experience. I've talked about how when I did it for 148-hour film project City, the first year I walked in, people were saying it's great that a black man's doing the competition. There are many comments about my race. I had a disagreement with the city producer. The year after, there were some things that were sent in emails that were very, very hurtful to each other. I blew up on stage one year and I alleged that they were not responding to a very sensitive subject that I was sharing appropriately because I was saying that my films were inspired by my suicide and depression, like the PTSD that I suffered, and we both have differences about like how this person responded. I remember them responding in a very mocking way, and they don't say that happened really. And they've not addressed that issue for over like 6 or 7 years. And then when they addressed that, it was more to defend the city producer. And then the city producer tried to get me in more amounts of trouble, and they didn't do anything about it. And then the city producer left, and there were some controversial articles about this person. So it's almost like like in like a period of 10 years, you can say that I probably had maybe a good like 6 months with a 40-hour film project, and everything's kind of gone to shit really. So I think what I want to say is that there's a couple of things. That number one, if I had any issue with any city producer, that's dead. It's old crap really. And then I also learned that I've had a hard time taking accountability because what happened was I've been bullied and taken advantage of a lot through my entire life. And I was misdiagnosed with autism. And one of the reasons why I was misdiagnosed is because people think that I'm naive or people think that they can disrespect me to my face a lot. And unfortunately, when you're in an industry like filmmaking, you will meet people who with very big egos that are very, very cutthroat. And sometimes, and generally just a bunch of like have a superiority complex, and that can transfer over into being racist. That can transfer over to being ableist, which you take advantage of people who you assume has a mental illness or don't has a mental illness or other things. What, if you're naive, I will just gladly steal food off your plate to feed myself and to feed my people. So it's understandable that there are plenty of people who get into filmmaking and don't understand like how cutthroat it definitely is, and that ultimately, it's like a facade of a very supportive community because, in general, as I said, in filmmaking, it's really kill or be killed. That's the nature of the beast. You want to meet nice people, go work in a hospital, or work among teachers or work in a different industry where, kindness is rewarded versus an industry like filmmaking where it is anybody to the top really. However necessary. It's almost like battle royale. Kill or be killed. That's just the nature of filmmaking. So with that said, it's just you have to accept that, and if you don't accept that, you will be taken advantage of. So I think with the 48-hour film project, I've told some people that my goal is really to be around in that competition for 3 more years. You know, and then after 3 years, I just will retire from life with it, because the problem is that there's been like feelings about wanting to come back to my home city and make a 48. There's been feelings about wanting to go to other places and create work. I'm also very sensitive about the quality of my work, because some of the experiences that I've had with the 48 has given me some trauma, some PTSD, some self doubt, and some of the discrimination that I faced in the 48-hour film project made me really, really depressed and really, really hurt that I gave up filmmaking for a while, really. And what I mean by discrimination is that many times I've been manipulated by people, or people treat me like I'm stupid or take advantage of me or make comments about my race, really. When, nobody wants to be involved in filmmaking, or nobody wants to be producing work for their film community if everybody thinks that they're the local, black man, or the local, retard, or whatever, really. And or if I'm very like book smart, I have a copy of Joseph Conrad. I have a copy of Carl Jung and other things like that. I read like a lot of stuff, and just show evidence. You know, I could read this book and I could say like, okay, I'm reading this book by Carl Jung, The Psychology of the Unconscious, and people could be like, oh well, you must have Asperger's syndrome, because of the stereotype that there are that either black people or people that are socially awkward and intelligent, they must have a form of autism, because in autism, Asperger's syndrome means that you have a stereotype of Asperger's syndrome means that you have like intelligence and book smart, but street smart social skills you don't really. So it is unfortunate that I feel a lot of like anxiety, but also as I learned that eventually in life we have to learn to pick ourselves up, because if we're always like saying, okay, well, there's a competition that makes me feel uncomfortable, or I feel like I'm in a film community that is very, very toxic. There's one thing in life, as they say, that every problem has one thing in common, which is we are accountable for being present. We're also accountable for not moving on. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of feel that there's two things that I can do. I can move on from the city that I live in, or maybe even move, geographically and move to another place that I feel comfortable at, or I can move on from the 48-hour film project and say, you know what, to hell with it. It's like a Walmart. It's gonna be around, and sometimes you get something with good quality from Walmart. Sometimes you get something from bad quality. And also the 48-hour film project, just like the Oscars and every other like film festival in this world, there's some ups and downs to everything. It's not just the 48-hour film project, and I think that's very important to say, because being anti 48 is very stupid. So I think for my future, what I would honestly say is that I would really say that I definitely want to try out some other cities with the 48-hour film project, and I also will aim to be positive and definitely like a good team player. And I would also say like whatever happened in the past is the past, and I acknowledge that times there's been many times in my life I've not been professional with the 48-hour film project. And I've also responded to a lot of situations in an unprofessional way. And when I first came into the 48, I was very concerned about winning. I treated all the awards like gold. I was kind of a blowhard. I had a big ego, and that just came from a lot of insecurities. And then maybe in a way that, I just liked the community element. So I felt very overwhelmed. I think on one side, I was almost like, Enzo Amore in WWE. They said that when he was young, he really liked being in WWE. So he was kind of a loudmouth. He was kind of annoying everybody because he was almost like an excited kid on Christmas. And sometimes when somebody's really excited, they're emotional and they don't think about what they're saying and doing. Versus like what you see in other people in WWE who go in, they're excited to be there, but they know that there's a certain professionalism, there's a certain way you talk to people, there's a certain rule to it. And I think that that's kind of what hurt me a lot, was that I was not really educated on personal politics or just the etiquette of a filmmaker. You go into a city and it's almost like being a lawyer. You watch what you say, you show respect to the people running the event, and whatever happens, happens. You make the best quality possible, then you also know that, yes, if you're friends with people running the event and other things like that, yes, you do have an edge over people who don't have that connection really, and that's with anything in filmmaking. The reason why a lot of people who are nominated for Oscars are because they're big celebrities or they're friends with people in the industry, and that goes with any 48. You do it for the Antarctica 48, really. It's friends of people who live up in Antarctica. Making good work, really. That's just how it is. But I think my ending would be, just to work hard at my skills to be like, okay, well, one of my dreams is to be a cinematographer and have some really, really high quality. Like, honestly, like, the way you're seeing this video, very poor lighting and, my crap in the background, I want to, like, say, what, if I do podcasts, if I do other things at home, I want to perfect that. So maybe if there's a 40-hour film project that's coming up in a couple of months, I'm like, well, I'm going to work on my lighting, I'm going to work on all these skills that I want to work on, and that's going to be my test, really. If I don't work as hard as I want to or dream to, I'm just going to make a crappy piece of work, and it's going to embarrass me. But if I work hard every single day to improve my lighting, to improve my composition, to improve things that I need to improve upon, then my work looks good on YouTube. My work looks good in my travel videos, and then when I do a 48 and join a team, I have a high chance of showing something that's going to look great, and then I also have a high chance of maybe winning something. And I've also said this too, that the awards really don't mean anything. They're just like, they don't really mean anything, in my opinion. And that's not a negative thing. Like, the only time awards mean anything in the 48, and that's any film festival, if it represents good work. And what I mean by that is I remember, like, I did a film and there was like one sound effect of a car crash that I did with a bunch of, like, clips from Pond 5, and I won, like, best audio. But if I did a film like Full Metal Jacket, or if I did a film like The French Connection, or other films with really excellent sound design, that would be a better representative of an award, because there's more meritocracy from there. And I also think that another thing that I'll say with the 48 is that, I've really represented myself very poorly, because I know, like, when I first did it, I was kind of like a blowhard and a loudmouth, and I talked about, just winning this from this city, that city, hoping to win, that's just all bad manners. And then the other thing, too, is that sometimes you'll meet people who have the mentality of, if you talk about winning so much, it's a good thing for you to lose, because then you learn that winning isn't everything. And that's a bad mentality, because there's a counter mentality to say, okay, in the real world, when you work hard, when you have work that's better than other people's work, like, if I filmed, like, with my cell phone and I edit it in DaVinci Resolve, and I use a drone and other things like that, and I use stabilizers, and I find good locations, and I film at sunrise and sunset, and I kind of connect my piece to the emotion of the characters. I use Shadow of the Field and other things like that. I would not be happy if, I don't, if it, a person would not be happy if somebody wins, like, best cinematography, and it's like America's Funniest Home Videos, where somebody's holding, like, a $150 Walmart camera. It's offensive to a lot of people when they have winners like that, really, because a lot of people think that awards are very meritocracy based. So people find out the hard way that it's really, no, it's not that, really. And then the other thing that people find out about is that, when you don't win, and you feel like you put in more of an effort, really, you have to know to be humble about it. You just say, okay, well, I disagree with this, but I'll keep it to myself, just like losing in a poker game. And if you don't do that, or even people that will instigate you, you have to just know how to just be careful, really. And I think that's how, when I was younger, I really wasn't that careful. But I also responded to a lot of situations immaturely. Like, I remember, like, having a disagreement. People told me it was politics. The reason why my film didn't win, then a city producer that I had said whatever film I made, to disrespect me further. And I remember going on Facebook, blasting the competition, and then I got an email from that city producer. Then I remember blasting the competition more, then talked to Mark Rupert, and then just doing other videos, really. So I've also, just will say this, I've not represented myself that well, really. And I think my ultimate thing is, really, why should I just do this competition if I've really hurt my reputation, or, I've been naive about my reputation. So I think that for me, like I said, I think 3 more years like 2028, I'm done with this competition. That's going to be the thing. And then one thing I'll also say about it is that, yes, if any city producer, anybody's watching this, I will say that, you know what, yes, I will be respectful of the 48. I will respect everybody. If I am disrespected by a city producer or anybody in that competition, I have no problem talking to Mark Rupert about it, and just saying, okay, well, this is how it happened. This is the issue, and I'm not going back to that city, and that's the end of it, really. Or I may just be like, I'll not say anything to him and not do the competition anymore, or I'll just not do that city and say nothing about it, really. But I got to be responsible with how I respond, really. And I've also just learned too that, as I've said before, if somebody is talking about my mental health issues, if people are being really disrespectful to me, and if there's any other issues that are going on, really, as I learned, it has nothing to do with my psychology. It has to do with the psychology of others, really, because in general, you want to be kind and respectful to everybody, really. Like, again, because again, if I'm going to a city like Connecticut and people are making comments about my race, and I'm dealing with mental health discrimination, and when I've made mistakes, people only focus on me taking accountability, but not people instigating me or taking advantage of me, you know, then there's people like me who would speak out, because I don't want other people to go into a city or a state, really, and have the same type of experience. And that's not really a city producer thing, that's a cultural thing. I do live in Connecticut, and that's not a good film community. There's a lot of people who are very racist. There's a lot of very emotionally abusive and manipulative people and conniving people. But I know, as I say, everywhere has that, and that has nothing to do with city producer. That's just like a Connecticut thing, really, of just being an entitled jerk. But that's just really filmmakers. So when I think of the 48 and I think about my future with it, I think about going to cities that make me happy and make me feel good. I think about just saying it's supposed to be a test for me to test what I can do. Test like the months that I'm putting in work. How I'm evaluating myself every month and being like, okay, well, you've not touched this equipment, you've not touched that equipment. You're spending too much time at work. You're not getting certain things done, really. So I really just think that for this competition, to wrap it up on a good note, I have to have something that I really want, which is to be a cinematographer and to tell stories, maybe get into animation and do it best as possible, really. And that's the only thing that matters. And use it as like a deadline. By this time, I want this. I want to have this skill, so when I do the 48, I can shine, really. And then also, like I said, I'll go to the cities that actually respect me. So if I'm not respected in Connecticut, and it's because I live in Connecticut and I work with Connecticut filmmakers, and I've heard racial slurs, and I've been pointed out for my skin color, and people take advantage of me because of my mental health issues. So it might make sense for me to just show my best elsewhere and be like, hey, I can't do Connecticut because of my bad experience, and that's not a city producer thing. That's really a sociology thing in Connecticut. So ultimately, I have to say, I think that my ending with the 48 would be doing the best as possible, not letting it live rent free in my head, letting go of the past, really understanding that there's accountability the competition needs to take to make sure they have professional event runners that treat everybody fairly and respectfully, and not look at their race, or not look at them as mentally ill, or not look at them as mentally ill to a point where they can be taken advantage of, and not consider gender or friends, really. But again, we're all human beings. We all have a certain bias towards people. But I really think that, as I said, after these 3 years, if I produce, if I just put a lot of time in it and I make great stuff and I win stuff, great. If I do the exact same thing, put all money, time, and make projects that nothing happens, great. Or if I'm like, nah, I just am up in the air about it, or other things come in my life after 3 years, so I do nothing, great, really. But I just think that I just want to end it on a more professional note, really. And I think that, as I said, 48 bashing really does nothing. So, as I said, realistically, and to be real with all you guys, as a film competition, it's not a good long-term investment, in my opinion. But because, making a film in a weekend is not that, it's just very, very challenging. it teaches you to rush instead of actually care about quality really and take your time, because that's how good films get made. Yes, sometimes when you're in Hollywood and you have a contract to get things done by a certain deadline or things like that, yes, it's good to have an ability not to dawdle or whatever like that. But good filmmaking is doing a film competition that comes once a year, so you have months to actually reshoot, re-edit, do the Kubrick thing, reshoot, re-edit, revise it, perfect it, rehearse it, and then turn something strong instead of just rushing through something in a weekend. And like they said, if a majority of the films are just pieces of crap, really, like if there's a city and there's 30 films and 24 of them are clunkers, does that mean it is a competition that helps people become better filmmakers? And then the other thing, as I said, really, that honestly, like a competition that gives you more time is a better competition, really. But ultimately, the connection, the friends you make, I made lifelong friends, really. It does that for a lot of people. So it does more positive than negatives. But, if you really care about filmmaking, the 4 Y'all Film Project, like as everybody said, is one small window. The people who spend their lives in the 48, it doesn't turn out well, really, because, the more you do it, the more it's very evidential that you don't know what it takes to be a filmmaker. Because to be a good filmmaker, you can't just spend your life around the 4 Y'all Film Project. And also to be a filmmaker, you learn from my mistake, which is you just don't take a past issue and you make that your entire life. And I overcame my issue because I learned that, while I've been bullied, while I've been sexually harassed, while I've dealt with racism and other things in my life, really, it doesn't mean that I'm easy or stupid. It means that people are more mean to take advantage of somebody who um, is not as socially, or life experience really. But ultimately, I've learned how to be more life experience as I've gone on. I gotta trust my abilities. But the other thing that I learned is also just, I've not always been the nicest guy really. So it's almost like, as the old saying goes, sometimes the best definition of an asshole is somebody who doesn't realize that they're an asshole. And then the other thing too is, if you consider everybody an asshole, more than likely you're an asshole. So that's also important as well, really. But like I just want to like end it strong and do the best that I can. And if I don't produce anything in this time, or everything that I do is not that great, really, then ultimately, I'll just end it. At least I'll have my humility and dignity. But I do have to make an ending with it, and I do want to be positive. Let go of the past. Anybody that's given me any wrong or hurt in the past. This is not a video to defame anybody or insult anybody. It's just, the past is the past. I need to get what I want out of filmmaking because, I'm almost 40 years old. So, I was a young 20-year-old when I first did the competition. Sad that, my golden years from early 20s through my early 30s, was all wasted on trauma that I got from the 48 and other parts of my life, really. But there's also personal accountability for moving myself forward, really. So, whatever happens to the 48, my ending with it, I have to make the work that I want to make in 3 years, and if I don't do that, it is what it is, really. Because I can't just kind of be dwelling on my entire life.